The attack in the parking garage. The late afternoon sun filtered weakly through the narrow openings of the hospital's underground parking garage, leaving long shadows sprawled across the concrete floor. The air smelled faintly of motor oil and disinfectant, a combination of the hospital above and the vehicles constantly cycling through the structure. Emma Catherine Morrison walked slowly toward her car, one hand resting protectively against the gentle curve of her swollen belly. At 7 months pregnant, her movements had grown careful, deliberate, and every step carried the weight of both exhaustion and hope. Her doctor's appointment had gone smoothly, and for a brief moment as she stepped into the quiet garage, she felt reassured. Her baby, little Grace, was healthy, growing strong, and the rhythmic flutter Emma had felt during the ultrasound had brought tears to her eyes. It should have been a peaceful end to the visit, but life, as Emma had learned over the past few months, rarely gave her peace anymore. The sharp echo of high-heeled shoes striking concrete shattered the calm. Emma stiffened instinctively, her heartbeat quickening as the sharp, deliberate rhythm grew closer. She turned slowly, and her worst fear materialized from behind one of the concrete pillars. Vanessa Claire Hoffman emerged like a predator stepping into the open, her slim figure clothed in a tailored blazer that screamed wealth, her golden hair immaculately styled despite the stale air of the garage. Her entire appearance was carefully constructed perfection, from her makeup to the designer handbag clutched tightly in her manicured hand. Her eyes, however, carried none of that polish. They glinted with venom. Well, Vanessa's voice cut through the dim space, cold and sharp. If it isn't the pathetic little housewife still pretending she has a place in Richard's life. Emma froze. Her first instinct was to shield her belly with both arms, her maternal instincts screaming louder than her voice ever could. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm, even though every nerve in her body screamed to run. But at 7 months pregnant, she couldn't run, not fast, not far. Instead, she forced her voice to steady itself even as fear coiled in her chest. "Vanessa," she said quietly, her tone trembling but clear. "This isn't the time or the place. I just came from my doctor's appointment. I don't want any trouble." Vanessa's laugh was hollow, humorless, echoing around the concrete walls. She took a deliberate step closer, heels clicking like warning shots. "Trouble? You think you don't deserve trouble? You've been trouble since the day you got pregnant. Richard never wanted that baby, Emma. He told me himself. You're the chain around his neck, and I won't let you keep dragging him down." The words sliced into Emma's heart. For months she had suspected the distance, the coldness, the way Richard no longer touched her belly or smiled when the baby kicked. But hearing it spoken out loud in this place by this woman felt like a dagger. Her knees trembled, yet she stood her ground, pressing against the side of her car, fumbling for her keys though her hands shook so badly she could barely grip them. "That's not true," Emma managed, her voice cracking despite her effort to sound strong. "Richard and I planned this baby. We wanted her." Plans change," Vanessa cut in, her voice growing sharper with each word. She stalked closer, her body language calculated, her every movement filled with a dangerous confidence. "Just like marriages change. Richard is done with you, Emma. He's building a new life with me, and you're nothing but an obstacle now." Emma's heart pounded so hard she thought the sound must echo across the garage. The walls seemed to close in, the harsh fluorescent lights above buzzing faintly, highlighting the sheer hostility radiating from the woman before her. She should have walked away, she should have stayed silent. But Emma had endured too much silence. Her life, her dignity, and her unborn child's safety were at stake. "You can't just ambush me here," Emma said, her voice steadier now, her protective instincts rising stronger than her fear. "This is harassment. I don't care what you think of me, but you don't have the right to follow me, to confront me like this. Stay away." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Then with a suddenness that made Emma's breath hitch, Vanessa swung her heavy handbag straight at Emma's midsection. Emma twisted instinctively, throwing her hip to the side to shield her belly, and the blow landed against her hip bone with a sickening thud. Pain shot through her side, forcing her to stumble, but she managed to keep her balance. "You're insane," Emma gasped, clutching the car door for support, one hand clamped protectively over her stomach. "Stop this. You'll hurt the baby." "That's the idea," Vanessa hissed, stepping closer, her face twisted with a cruel smile. "Richard doesn't want that child, and the sooner you understand it, the better for everyone." Before Emma could react, Vanessa shoved her hard against the car door. The metallic slam echoed, and Emma's legs buckled. She fell sideways onto the cold concrete, the rough surface scraping her knee raw as she tried desperately to shield her belly with both arms. The world tilted for a moment, pain radiating through her hip and knee, but above it all, one frantic thought consumed her. Grace. The baby. Please let her be okay. Vanessa, breathing heavily, straightened her blazer as if brushing away an inconvenience. Maybe now you'll understand, she said with icy satisfaction. Richard belongs with me, not with some fragile, pathetic woman who can't even stay on her feet. With that, she turned sharply, heels clicking once again in a rhythm of triumph, disappearing into the shadows of the garage. For a moment, Emma could only lie there, tears blurring her vision, her breathing shallow and panicked. Then, slowly, she pressed a trembling hand against her stomach. Relief surged through her as she felt the flutter of tiny movements inside. Grace was still there, still alive, still fighting. A sob broke free, but it was mixed with fierce gratitude. Forcing herself to sit up against the side of her car, Emma wiped her tears with shaking hands and pulled out her phone. Her brother's number appeared instantly in her contacts, her most trusted call in the world. Jake Samuel Carter, former Marine, protector since childhood, the man who had always been her shield when the world turned cruel. She hit dial and he answered on the first ring. Emma? His voice was alert, instantly tense. What's wrong? You sound upset. Her throat closed, tears threatening again, but she forced the words out. Jake, I need you. She tried to hurt the baby. Where are you? Jake's tone shifted instantly, his military training kicking in. Calm, commanding, ready. The parking garage. Memorial Medical Center. Emma whispered, her body trembling too hard to say more. Stay exactly where you are. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. I'll be there in 10 minutes, Jake said, his voice steady but filled with a dangerous undercurrent of rage. Emma lowered the phone, pressing it against her chest as fresh tears fell. She wasn't alone anymore. Jake was coming. And if there was one thing Emma knew for certain, it was that her brother had never once failed to protect her. As the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the garage entrance, Emma closed her eyes, her hand still pressed protectively against her belly. The game had changed. Vanessa thought she could intimidate and silence her, but she had made one fatal mistake. She had laid her hands on a Marine sister, and that was something no one would get away with. The protector's arrival. The sound of an engine roared through the otherwise quiet parking garage, snapping Emma's head up from where she sat slumped against the car door. Relief washed over her the instant she recognized the familiar black pickup truck barreling down the ramp. Even before it had come to a complete stop, Jake Carter was out of the driver's seat, the door left hanging open as he sprinted across the concrete floor. His boots hit the ground with a heavy determination, every line of his body radiating urgency. In that moment, Emma felt the same security she had known as a child when her older brother had stepped in between her and the bullies at school, the same steady courage that had carried him through 3 tours as a Marine. Emma, Jake dropped to his knees beside her, scanning her quickly with a precision that came from years of battlefield assessments. His sharp green eyes caught every detail, the scrape on her knee, the way she cradled her belly, the raw fear etched across her pale face. Talk to me. Are you hurt? Is the baby okay? Emma clung to his arm, trying to steady her voice. I think Grace is fine. She's been moving since it happened. But my hip hurts and my knee. She hit me, Jake. She aimed for the baby. Her words broke, but she forced them out, unwilling to crumble now that her protector had arrived. Jake's jaw tightened, his expression hardening into something dangerous. He pulled Emma gently to her feet, his arm strong and steady around her shoulders, supporting her weight as though she were fragile glass. We're going to the emergency room right now, he said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. We'll let the doctors confirm Grace is safe. And then, his eyes darkened with controlled fury. Then we make sure the woman who did this doesn't see daylight without answering for it. Emma's throat tightened with gratitude and fear. Jake, it was Vanessa. Richards, his girlfriend. The name hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Jake's face hardened, the muscle in his jaw twitching. Vanessa Hoffman, he muttered, recognition flashing in his eyes. I know her. Morrison Tech's marketing director. My company oversees security for 2 buildings she frequents. He paused, his expression darkening further. I've heard enough about her to know she plays dirty, but attacking a pregnant woman? My sister? His voice dropped, low and menacing. That's war. He guided Emma carefully into the truck, buckling her seatbelt with care, ensuring it lay across her shoulder and chest without pressing her belly. Then, slipping behind the wheel, his voice switched into the calm, controlled cadence that had carried soldiers through chaos. Stay calm, Em. Keep your breathing steady. Every minute Grace keeps moving is good. I'm getting you to the ER in 5. As he drove, his phone connected to the hands-free system, and Jake's demeanor shifted into tactical efficiency. Jimmy, he barked, as soon as his lead technician picked up. I need the security feed from Memorial Medical Center's parking garage. Pull everything from the last 2 hours, focus on Level 2, Section C. My sister was attacked. Secure the footage before anyone else touches it. Emma's eyes widened, realizing in that moment how much Jake's life's work had silently shielded her without her knowing. His company, his network, his vigilance, it had all been there, like invisible armor around her. He hadn't just left the Marines. He had built a battlefield of his own, one where he could still protect those who mattered. Within minutes, the truck skidded to a stop outside the emergency entrance. Jake was out again in a heartbeat, circling to Emma's side, helping her gently out of the seat. His hand never left her arm as they walked inside, his protective stance like a barrier between her and the rest of the world. The antiseptic smell of the ER hit Emma, mingling with her fear, but the steady presence of her brother kept her upright. The nurse at the reception desk looked up, startled by the intensity radiating off Jake. My sister is 7 months pregnant, he said in clipped tones, guiding Emma forward. She was assaulted. She needs to be seen immediately. The urgency in his voice brooked no delay. Within minutes, Emma was ushered into a treatment room where Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the same obstetrician who had just seen her earlier, entered with concern written across her face. Emma, what happened? She was attacked, Jake answered. For her, his voice calm but cold, his presence filling the small room. Hit in the hip, shoved down. I need you to check both her and the baby thoroughly. Emma lay back, her hand trembling as the ultrasound probe touched her skin once again. For a long moment, the silence was unbearable, broken only by the faint hum of the machine. Then, the sound filled the room. Grace's heartbeat steady and strong. Relief poured out of Emma in a flood of tears. She's perfect, Dr. Mitchell said with a reassuring smile. No signs of distress. The bruises on your hip and knee are painful, but they won't affect the pregnancy. You'll be sore, Emma, but your baby is fine. Emma exhaled a shaky breath, tears sliding down her cheeks. Jake, standing by her side with arms crossed tightly over his chest, let his shoulders drop slightly, though his expression remained stone. Thank you, doctor, he said, his voice softer now. Once Dr. Mitchell left, Emma looked at her brother with tear-filled eyes. She said Richard doesn't want this baby, that his lawyer told him to wait until after Grace is born to file for divorce. She knew things, Jake. Things only Richard should have known. Jake crouched beside her, his green eyes sharp and focused. Then this isn't just jealousy, Em. This is calculated. She wasn't lashing out. She was carrying out a plan. And that makes this more than an assault. This is an attack with intent. Emma shook her head, overwhelmed. I thought maybe after Grace was born things could get better, that Richard would come back to me, that he'd remember why we started this family. But now... She broke off, pressing her face into her hands. Jake placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Listen to me. You've been carrying this weight alone for too long, but you don't have to anymore. I've got you. I've got Grace, and I'm not letting either of you face this without backup. His phone buzzed and he checked the message quickly, his face darkening further. Jimmy's enhanced the footage. It shows everything. Vanessa waiting behind the pillar, stalking you, swinging that purse at your belly. It's all there. Clear as day. Emma closed her eyes, torn between devastation and relief. Proof meant justice, but it also meant facing the truth she had been denying, that Richard's betrayal was deeper than she had imagined. Jake rose to his full height, his presence filling the room. This isn't the end, Emma. This is the beginning. She wanted to break you. Instead, she just woke up the wrong man's protective instincts. And trust me, no one goes after my sister and walks away untouched. In that sterile hospital room, as the monitor beside her continued to echo the steady rhythm of her baby's heartbeat, Emma realized something she hadn't felt in months. She wasn't powerless anymore. The woman who had fallen in the parking garage had been frightened and broken, but the woman rising now, with her brother at her side, was no longer a victim. Vanessa thought she had silenced Emma Morrison, but she had only given her a reason to fight. The web of lies. The hospital lights flickered softly above Emma as she sat upright on the examination bed, her mind a storm of emotions. Relief that Grace was safe pulsed inside her like a steady drumbeat, but it clashed violently with the devastation that had taken root in her heart. Every word Vanessa had thrown at her in that parking garage replayed in cruel loops, each one slicing deeper than the last. Richard never wanted that baby. He's done with you. He's waiting until after the birth for divorce. It wasn't just the assault that rattled her. It was the confirmation of what she had been too afraid to admit. For months she had clung to the hope that her husband's distance was temporary, a byproduct of work stress, or maybe the looming fear of fatherhood. But Vanessa's knowledge of specific details, down to the advice of Richard's lawyer, could not have been coincidence. That kind of precision only came from inside conversations, which meant Richard had not only been unfaithful, but he had confided in his mistress about the most personal, intimate aspects of his marriage. Jake sat in the corner of the room, his body still as stone, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. He was watching her, but his expression carried that dangerous calm Emma recognized from his years in the Marines. It wasn't indifference. It was control. The kind that meant every ounce of rage inside him was being caged, ready to be unleashed when the time was right. Emma wiped at her swollen eyes, her voice trembling. He doesn't want me anymore, Jake. He doesn't want Grace. All this time I thought if I just tried harder, if I gave him space, if I kept believing in us, things would get better. But I was wrong. He's been planning his future with her. Jake leaned forward, his voice steady but edged with steel. You're not wrong for hoping, Emma. That's who you are. You've always chosen to believe in the best of people, even when they don't deserve it. But this isn't about hope anymore. It's about survival. For you, and for Grace. And I'm not letting either of you face this alone. Before Emma could respond, Jake's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, his eyes narrowing, then turned the screen toward her. A text from his technician filled the display. Footage secured, shows clear premeditation, copy locked in cloud, backup stored offline, no chance of tampering. Emma's breath caught. So, it's real. She can't deny it. It's all there? Jake nodded once. Every second, from the moment she waited behind that pillar to the moment she walked away like nothing happened. She made her choice, and now she's going to face the consequences. Emma pressed a hand against her stomach, feeling the reassuring movement of her baby. Grace kicked softly as if reminding her mother that she wasn't alone. For the first time in months, Emma allowed a flicker of resolve to ignite in her chest. Maybe she had been broken by Richard's betrayal, but she wouldn't let Vanessa steal her child's safety. The door to the room opened then, and a nurse stepped in, holding out a cordless phone. Mrs. Morrison, your husband is on the line. He says it's urgent. Emma froze. For a moment she considered refusing. What could he possibly say now that would matter? But then she glanced at Jake, who raised an eyebrow. Your call, Em, he said quietly. But whatever he says, remember, you've already seen the truth with your own eyes. Emma took the phone with trembling hands. Hello? Richard's voice came through, tense, annoyed. Emma, what the hell is going on? I got a call that you were in the ER. Are you trying to create drama? Do you have any idea what this is doing to my reputation? Emma closed her eyes, the sound of his voice so familiar and yet so painfully hollow now. I was attacked, Richard. Vanessa was waiting for me in the parking garage. She hit me. She tried to hurt the baby. That's ridiculous, Richard snapped, his tone sharp with dismissal. Vanessa would never do something like that. She told me what happened, She said you stumbled, that you fell, and now you're blowing this out of proportion. Pregnancy makes women clumsy, Emma, and emotional. You're making a scene over nothing. The words stung, but they no longer pierced her the way they once might have. This time, Emma's anger burned hotter than her grief. She met Jake's steady gaze, drawing strength from the unspoken support in his eyes. I see, she said coldly. So you believe her version, not mine. You think I imagined being shoved, imagined a handbag swung at my stomach, imagined lying on the concrete trying to protect our daughter? A pause followed, the silence on Richard's end heavy. Then his voice returned, forced, defensive. Emma, you've been so emotional lately. Vanessa was just trying to talk to you. She thought maybe she could smooth things over. She said you refused her help and stormed off. That doesn't sound like an attack. It sounds like you're twisting things. Emma's hand clenched around the phone, her voice turning icy. And when exactly did she tell you this, Richard? Immediately after she left me lying on the ground. Did she call you before or after she reapplied her makeup in her car? Another silence, longer this time. Richard faltered, and Emma heard the slip in his tone as he scrambled. She called me afterward. She was worried about you. She said you seemed upset. Emma's fury hardened into something sharper, cleaner. How thoughtful of her. And did she also tell you she's pregnant? The silence stretched for half a minute. Finally, Richard's voice returned, low and cold. We'll talk about this when I get home. No, Richard, Emma said, her voice steady with newfound strength. You won't because you're not coming home. Not tonight. Not again. I'm changing the locks. And before he could protest, she hung up. The phone slipped from her hand onto the bed and Emma exhaled a shaky breath. For the first time, she didn't feel like the abandoned wife begging for scraps of affection. She felt like a woman reclaiming her dignity. Jake picked up the phone, his mouth twitching in something like pride. That was well handled, Em. You didn't give him a single inch. Emma nodded, though her hand still trembled. I'm done being a victim. If he wants Vanessa, he can have her. But he won't have me. And he won't take Grace. Jake stood, his voice steady but brimming with restrained power. Good. Because this isn't just about betrayal anymore. This is about justice. And we're going to bring every ounce of truth into the light. The police will have the footage by morning. Vanessa thought she could walk away clean. But she doesn't know what it means to pick a fight with a Marine's family. As Emma sat back, her heart still pounding, she realized she was no longer afraid of Richard's dismissals or Vanessa's cruelty. She had proof. She had her brother. And most importantly, she had the will to fight for her child. For the first time in months, she didn't feel powerless. She felt ready. And across town, in his glittering high-rise office, Richard Morrison had no idea that the foundation of lies he had built was about to collapse beneath him. Justice and courage in Morandan. Night after the hospital visit stretched endlessly for Emma. She sat in her living room, the glow of a single lamp casting soft shadows across the walls. The silence of the house, once comforting, now felt hollow, like the echo of a broken promise. The photographs on the mantel, her wedding day with Richard, vacations where they smiled as if they had everything, seemed almost mocking now. Each image was a reminder of a life she thought she had, one that had been slipping away piece by piece without her realizing. Yet as she rested her hand gently on her belly and felt grace stir within her, Emma knew she had something more important than Richard's betrayal. She had her daughter, and she had her brother. Jake had insisted on staying the night. He sat in the armchair across from her, alert even in repose, his eyes sharp despite the late hour. It reminded Emma of when they were children and she had been too scared to sleep after a nightmare. Jake had always stayed awake by her side until dawn, keeping watch. That protective instinct had never left him, and now it was sharper than ever. Tomorrow I'm taking the footage directly to the police, Jake said finally, breaking the quiet. His voice carried the steady calm of someone who had faced battlefields and chaos but had never lost sight of his mission. They won't be able to ignore what Vanessa did. And once the report is filed, it's out of Richard's hands. He won't be able to cover it up no matter how much money or influence he tries to throw at it. Emma nodded, her throat tight. He'll try, though. He'll protect her. He'll say anything to make it look like I'm lying. He already told me I imagined it. Her voice cracked, but she steadied herself quickly, refusing to crumble again. But this time I won't let him silence me. Jake leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze fierce. Good. That's the strength I want to hear. You're not the victim here, Emma. You're the witness. And you're the mother of a child whose life was just threatened. Those are powerful truths, and they're on your side. The following morning, they drove to the police precinct. The building was stark, functional, its walls lined with posters about crime prevention and public safety. Emma's palms sweated as they sat down across from Detective Lisa Reynolds, a seasoned officer with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority. She listened intently as Jake placed the secured flash drive on her desk and explained what it contained. "Security footage from the parking garage," Jake said crisply. "My company pulled it before anyone else could tamper with it. It shows Vanessa Hoffman waiting, confronting and attacking my sister. Every detail is on record." Detective Reynolds inserted the drive and began reviewing the footage. The silence in the room grew heavier with each passing second as the video unfolded. The moment Vanessa stepped out from behind the pillar, the calculated swing of her handbag, the coldness with which she walked away, it all played out in undeniable clarity. When the video ended, Detective Reynolds leaned back, her expression grim. "This isn't just assault," she said, her voice steady but weighted. "This is premeditated, and given that you're pregnant, Mrs. Morrison, it elevates the crime significantly. We'll pursue charges of aggravated assault, possibly attempted harm to an unborn child. It won't be easy. Vanessa will hire an expensive attorney, and Richard's influence could muddy the waters. But this is strong evidence." Emma felt a shiver of both fear and relief. It was terrifying to think of the battle ahead, but the truth was finally visible to someone outside her family. She wasn't alone anymore. Meanwhile, across the city in Richard's sleek corner office, Vanessa sat perched elegantly in one of the leather chairs opposite his desk. Her appearance was flawless as always, though her hands fidgeted in her lap, betraying the nerves she tried to conceal. Richard paced in front of the window, his voice sharp. "Do you have any idea the position you've put me in?" he snapped. "Emma called the police. She's making accusations. This could destroy everything I've built if it goes public." Vanessa's eyes widened innocently, her tone honeyed. "Richard, I told you she fell. She's using this to punish you because she knows about us. She's trying to ruin your reputation before the divorce." She reached out, touching his arm gently. "You have to believe me. I would never hurt her, never hurt a pregnant woman. You know me better than that." Richard hesitated, torn between the words he wanted to believe and the gnawing doubts in the back of his mind. He wanted Vanessa's version of events to be true, wanted to see her as the victim of Emma's supposed hysteria. But fragments of unease pricked at him. The timing of Emma's call, the specifics Vanessa seemed to know, the tension in his wife's voice when she said she had proof. Still, he forced himself to ignore it. "The police won't have anything. It's your word against hers." But what Richard didn't know was that Jake had already ensured the footage was in the hands of law enforcement. By the time Richard was preparing to meet his lawyer, the wheels of justice were already in motion. Back at the precinct, Emma gave her statement in full detail, her voice trembling at first but growing steadier with each sentence. She described the words Vanessa had used, the threats about her unborn baby, the shove against the car, the cold way she had walked away. Every detail spilled out like poison she had been holding inside for too long. When she finished, Detective Reynolds leaned forward, her expression firm. "Mrs. Morrison, I want you to know this. Women like Vanessa often think they can manipulate their way out of accountability, but the law doesn't bend as easily as they imagine. We'll take it from here, but I need you to be strong. The defense will come after your credibility. They'll try to paint you as emotional, unstable, even vindictive. You have to be prepared." Emma nodded slowly, her fingers lacing protectively over her belly. For a moment, fear rose again. Fear of the courtroom, of Richard's cold dismissals, of Vanessa's lies. But then she felt the soft, reassuring flutter from within her. Grace was alive, strong, waiting to come into the world. That thought filled her with courage. "I'll be ready," she said quietly. "For her, I'll be ready." As they left the station, Jake walked beside her, his stride purposeful, his eyes scanning everything with the vigilance of a soldier still on duty. "This isn't over yet," he told her. "But we've taken the first step. And Emma, I swear on everything I am, Vanessa Hoffman is not going to walk away from this." Emma looked at her brother then, her heart swelling with gratitude. He wasn't just her protector. He was her anchor, the one who had reminded her that she wasn't powerless, that she wasn't trapped. And for the first time since discovering Richard's betrayal, Emma felt like she had a future worth fighting for. Vanessa had thought she could erase her by one act of cruelty in a parking garage. Instead, she had awakened a fire that neither she nor Richard was prepared to face. The war for truth had begun. Freedom, hope, and new beginnings. The days following Emma's police statement unfolded like a storm gathering strength. News of the investigation spread quickly through the city's corporate circles, whispered first in quiet tones and then shouted across boardrooms. A scandal had touched Morrison Tech Solutions, and in that world of gleaming skyscrapers and polished reputations, nothing traveled faster than the scent of blood in the water. Richard tried desperately to contain it, calling in favors from lawyers and public relations firms, but no amount of spin could erase the damning clarity of the security footage. The image of Vanessa Hoffman swinging her handbag at a pregnant woman was too vivid, too undeniable. No carefully crafted press release could change what the world could now see with its own eyes. For Emma, the experience was surreal. She found herself both terrified and oddly liberated. Each day she rose, her body sore but healing, her spirit steadier than it had been in months. She attended meetings with the police, spoke with detectives, and repeated her account again and again. Every time she told her story, it grew easier to bear, as though by speaking the truth she was reclaiming the power Vanessa had tried to strip from her. And through it all, Jake remained at her side, his unwavering presence a shield against doubt and despair. He drove her to every appointment, stood quietly in corners during interviews, and never once let her feel she was walking into battle alone. The court proceedings began quickly, the evidence too strong to allow delay. Vanessa walked into the courtroom with her head held high, her polished appearance immaculate, as though she believed her beauty and charm could still bend reality in her favor. She spoke to reporters with soft-spoken innocence, claiming Emma was exaggerating, claiming the footage had been misinterpreted, claiming she would never harm a pregnant woman. But inside the courtroom, under the harsh light of truth, her performance crumbled. The footage rolled across the screen, each frame revealing her intent, each second painting her cruelty in undeniable colors. Emma sat in the witness stand, her voice steady as she described what had happened, her hand unconsciously resting over her belly as she spoke not just for herself, but for the child who had nearly been harmed. Richard sat behind Vanessa, his expression strained. He had chosen his side long ago, and now he was shackled to it. The man who once prided himself on his reputation as a shrewd businessman now looked like a cornered figure, caught in a scandal that threatened to unravel everything he had built. He tried to glare at Emma as if to intimidate her, but Emma no longer flinched beneath his gaze. For the first time, she realized he had no real power over her anymore. His money, his status, his name, none of it mattered in that room. What mattered was the truth, and the truth was on her side. When the verdict came, it was swift and clear. Vanessa was found guilty of aggravated assault, with the additional charge of attempted harm to an unborn child. The sentence would not erase the pain she had caused, but it was justice, and justice mattered. Vanessa's polished mask finally cracked when the judge delivered the ruling. The cold, perfect smile slipped away, replaced by fury and fear as she realized that charm could not rescue her from consequences. For Emma, watching that mask shatter was both devastating and healing. The woman who had tried to steal her life, her family, and even her child's safety would never again wield power over her. Richard's downfall came quietly but swiftly afterward. Clients began pulling contracts, investors lost confidence, and the board of Morrison Tech Solutions demanded explanations he could not give. His name, once spoken with respect in corporate circles, became a stain whispered in scandal. He had chosen Vanessa, and in choosing her, he had tied his fate to her destruction. By the time the dust settled, Richard was left with a hollow shell of a company and a reputation that could not be salvaged. For Emma, however, life began to move in a different rhythm. The locks on her home had been changed, and with Jake's help, she created a new space that was hers alone. Each room, once filled with reminders of Richard, slowly transformed into a sanctuary for her and Grace. Jake's security company ensured that she was protected, and for the first time in years, Emma slept peacefully at night knowing someone was watching over her. The weeks turned into months, and soon Emma found herself in a hospital room again, but this time for a very different reason. Grace entered the world with a cry that echoed like victory, a tiny, perfect reminder of everything Emma had fought for. Tears streamed down her face as she held her daughter for the first time, her heart overflowing with love so fierce it erased every shadow of doubt she had once carried. Jake stood at her side, his broad frame bent over the hospital bed as he gazed at his niece. His eyes softened, pride and tenderness replacing the sharp focus of the Marine he had once been. "She's strong," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like her mother." Emma smiled through her tears. "She's alive because of you, Jake. Because you came when I called. Because you believed me when no one else did." Jake shook his head, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "No, Em, she's alive because you never gave up. Because even when you were broken, you chose to stand. I just did what brothers are supposed to do." In that moment, Emma understood something profound. She had lost a husband, yes, but she had never truly lost family. She had a brother who had fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself. And she had a daughter who would grow up knowing her mother had chosen courage over despair. As the days passed and Emma adjusted to life with Grace, she realized that the story of her life was no longer one of betrayal and pain. It was a story of resilience, of strength discovered in the face of cruelty, of love that had refused to be destroyed. The mansion Richard once filled with his absence now echoed with the laughter of her baby, the warmth of her brother's visits, and the quiet certainty that she had built something unshakable. Vanessa's name faded from the headlines, her charm turned into infamy. Richard's empire crumbled, leaving him a man who had gambled everything and lost. But Emma's story did not end in ruin. It blossomed into something new. She stood taller now, spoke with confidence, and carried herself with the dignity of a woman who had faced darkness and emerged stronger for it. In the stillness of one evening, as Emma rocked Grace to sleep by the window, she whispered softly to her daughter, "You'll grow up knowing that no matter what happens, you are worth fighting for. You'll never doubt that you are loved." Grace stirred, her tiny fingers curling around her mother's, and Emma felt an overwhelming wave of peace. She had been broken, but she had been rebuilt. She had been betrayed, but she had chosen love. And as she looked toward the future, Emma knew that this was not just an ending, it was a beginning. A new life, a new strength, a new chapter written not in fear but in hope. And in the quiet of that home, with her daughter in her arms and her brother's strength always near, Emma Morrison finally understood what true freedom felt like.